When we talk about lectures, it seems to go hand in hand with the idea of students taking notes. After all, the point of a lecture is that it's material that's not simply word for word in the textbook. I mean, you're not just reading the book to them, at least I hope you're not. But if that's the case, how do the students have material to review? They can't just use the textbook, they need some form of notes. But what do we usually do with this? We usually give the students handouts with the lecture basically reduced to key points with blanks for key words. While we lecture, we want the students to fill in the blanks. Now, I mentioned this in the last session, and we must move away from this approach. It simply does not stimulate the students to engage mentally with the material. I mean, look at the last point of this outline. The Legislative Assembly had to blank, blank, and blank. So while you're lecturing, you say, the Legislative Assembly had to debate, discuss, and pass laws. While you're lecturing, you emphasize the words that go in the blanks, or maybe you write them on the board. Or maybe you have a PowerPoint with those as 3 bullet points. You do this because these are key points that you want the students to remember. But mentally, what's going on with the students in their minds? Now, I know sometimes we wonder if anything's going on in their minds, but let's just say that they are doing something. Okay, so what they're hearing while you're talking is blah, blah. I mean, think about the teacher in the Charlie Brown videos. Okay, wow, 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 wow. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Legislative Assembly had to. They hear that and then they perk up mentally. It's like, okay, that's the next point I have to look for. They see that there are 3 blanks, so they listen for the next 3 words or key points that you say. They write those in the blanks. Then they just mentally go into neutral again until they hear the next key trigger words. Or when you put up a slide on the PowerPoint, they just copy the words down while ignoring what you're saying about them. Do the students understand what debate was? Do they understand what it meant to pass laws? Do they understand how that fits in the context of previous lectures and the lectures that follow? Probably not, but they have those 3 blanks filled in with words. For all the understanding they have, though, you could have said, the Legislative Assembly had to archiero, poruo, and zeteo. Those are 3 Greek words. They'd need help spelling them, but they could fill in the blanks. They'd have no understanding, but they probably don't have much understanding of the words they wrote anyway. And then think about how you assess them. This is a whole other question. But you give them a test with a question, what were 3 things the Legislative Assembly had to do? So they've memorized those 3 terms. Again, they don't understand anything about them. They just know those are the words they put in the blanks. If you were to say, give 3 examples of how the colonial legislature acted, they wouldn't know how to connect their notes with that. And then think about when a student is absent. What does he do? Well, he gets a copy of the lecture notes from you, the blank outline. Then he goes to a friend and just copies the words down in the blanks. Okay, what goes in the first blank here? Okay, debate. Next blank, discuss. Third blank, pass laws. He doesn't even need to mentally connect those words with the stem of that statement. The Legislative Assembly had to, whatever. So it's literally meaningless. He's just writing down the words in the blanks. Go back to our last session. If all we want is that the students' notes have the right information in them, in the right words, then the quickest way to do that is just give them our notes. We tell them, here are 3 points you have to know about the Legislative Assembly. Go home and memorize them and give them back to me on the test. Now the thing is, I know that none of you believes this is good education. None of you thinks, if my students can spit back those 3 terms to me, then I'm happy with that. They understand the roles of the Legislative Assembly. I mean, you all want your students to wrestle intellectually with the material, to move to higher order thinking, to evaluate it, to apply it to their lives, and so on. But this traditional process of notes goes directly contrary to that desire. Now, I know that sometimes what you're after is rote memorization, and that's valid. I'm not using that in a negative sense, rote memorization. Sometimes students just need to memorize things word for word. The three branches of our federal government, the parts of speech and grammar, the names of the four Gospels. And so there are going to be times when you might give the students a sheet that says the names of the four Gospels are blank, 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 and blank. But I believe those instances should be few and far between. I definitely think they should not be the entirety of our lectures and the student notes. I also believe there are some more effective ways to get students to learn even those rote memory items than just lecturing and having the students copy them down, but that's another session. My point here is that most of your lectures and most of the student notes should not be in this form. So to improve it, let's think about the purposes of having students take notes in the first place. First, at a rudimentary level, it forces our students to listen during the lecture. That's why we're not just handing out notes to them. They wouldn't listen to us at all. They'd have everything they need so they could just tune us out. If we make them take notes of some kind, they're forced to some degree to listen. Second, having students take notes gives them a record of the content we're teaching. Again, we're not just reading the textbook to them, so we want them to know what we're teaching. We believe that what we teach is important, and it's not simply what they can find in the book. If they don't take notes, they don't have a record of what we've taught. Third, as they get ready for the tests, the notes give them content they need to review and prepare for those tests. When they study, they can look over their notes and know they have the most important content there. Without notes, they're left to try to remember what you taught or to reconstructing it from other materials like the book. And beyond the test, we actually hope that, especially with some of our higher level courses, they might use their notes in the future just to remember the important material. If we're teaching a class on the Gospel of Luke, we would hope that the students might refer to it sometime in the future when they're studying the Gospel of Luke for themselves. Fourth, the very act of writing or typing reinforces material in your memory to some degree. On a personal level, I take notes during my pastor's sermons. The reason I do that is because it helps me remember what he says. When I write things down, I listen better and remember them better. Even if I never go back to those notes again, just the fact that I've taken the mental energy to write them down, the message gets imprinted on my mind better. So how can we restructure the way we have students take notes and meet these purposes? One of the first things we need to teach is paraphrasing. When you think about it, that's what taking lecture notes really is. You're listening to someone speak and you're jotting down a paraphrase, not word for word, of what the person says. Of course, your paraphrase is more concise than what the lecturer says, and your paraphrase needs to be understandable by you at a later time. This is a whole major skill in itself, but in this context, here's how a teacher can work on this. Let's say you're teaching about Gideon in the book of Judges. You read or tell the students about the instances of the fleece with Gideon. And then you stop and say, now, put that in your own words. Take a minute, write down what happened, but don't use more than 3 sentences. Give them a minute, then have them turn to a partner and help each other. Then call on someone to read his sentences. You might say, Gideon put out a fleece, and it had dew when the ground was dry. Then he did it again, and the fleece was dry when the ground was wet. Then call on someone else to read what they had. They're going to word it differently. Then call on somebody else. The key here is that the only corrections you would make would be if someone actually misses the content, like if he says Gideon put out a fleece, the angel burned it up. Otherwise, you allow and encourage students to say things differently. See, what often happens when we have notes, when we have students take notes, is that students think they have to have everything word for word exactly right in their notes. So you have to dictate what to write. all that teaches them how to do is how to take dictation. It's not teaching them how to take notes. What you want is for students to realize that they don't all have to have the same words in their notes. And this might be a new concept for students, to realize that what they have, what one student has, is different than what another student has. In fact, you should require this. You could call on one student to read what he wrote, then say, okay, Billy, say the same thing, but use different words. Then call on another student to do the same thing. Now, does this take longer than what you've been doing? Well, it probably does. But again, remember what we're after. We want the students to learn how to take notes for themselves, which involves paraphrasing. If our goal is that they have the same words, all of them in their notes, then just hand out the completed notes for them. We want to train our students in important skills, and that takes time. Besides, it might not take much longer than what you're already doing. Think about what happens in the traditional fill-in-the-blank approach. You say a sentence where they're supposed to fill in the blanks. Invariably, a few students miss it. So you repeat it. Then you wait for them to finish filling in the blanks before you go on. Then you have someone wondering how to spell one of the words, so you go back and spell it. Or maybe you put your notes on PowerPoint, so you show a slide, then you have to wait while the students copy the information on the slides. By the time you go through that, it doesn't take a whole lot longer just to work through a paraphrase with them. Besides, the goal is that as the students progress through the grade levels, they won't need you to keep working through it with them. They will know how to paraphrase and how to write notes in their own words. Of course, you want to encourage students to use shortcuts as they take notes, abbreviations. Remember, the purpose of notes is so they can use them, not so they can communicate with someone else. You're not looking for grammar, you're not looking for those types of things. Fortunately, many of our students are already used to using simple abbreviations as shortcuts. They text one another. In fact, you could tell students that their notes are supposed to be written like they would be if they're texting to someone else. So, if they want to write down Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they could use texting to write that down in their notes. It's perfectly understandable to them, and it's a lot quicker. You can encourage this and promote it for their notes. One thing which you can use to get students transition to taking their own notes is to give them open outlines like this one. Here's the overall structure of the lesson, but not the details for the points. Those are the things the students fill in, paraphrasing the lesson material. So when you start doing this, you could teach about the temptation. Then say, okay, what are the main points we need to remember about the temptation? Take some suggestions, and then move on. In this way, you're providing some help for the students, but not opening things up for a dictation or a word-for-word approach. When students get more used to taking notes and not waiting for you to tell them what to write, one excellent system is used in many colleges and high schools, the Cornell Notes approach. We've mentioned this in a previous lesson. In this method, the student's page is divided into 3 sections. You've got about a fourth of the page at the bottom horizontally, then the top 3/4 of the page is divided with the vertical line about a third of the way across. And you could run off blank copies of pages like this for a while and then teach the students to do it themselves. In the largest right-hand section, they take traditional notes, summarizing, paraphrasing your lesson. You can combine this with the open outline. You could have the outline on the right side and let them fill in the details. Then, when you give breaks during the lecture, which you should do, we've mentioned that before, during the breaks they look in the left column and they jot down some key questions about the content. Maybe you say, okay, in the left column, I want you to write down one test question that could be asked about that content. Or they can note down questions that they still have about the material, something they don't understand. Or they could list something that really needs to be emphasized. Then at the end of the lesson, they go to the bottom of the page and they summarize all the material. Maybe they list 1 or 2 main ideas to review. Or maybe if it's in a Bible class, they list an application of it to their lives. So to conclude this brief lesson on note-taking, Here are the main points. Do not use fill-in-the-blank notes. This is deadly when we want students to engage with the lesson. Teach students how to paraphrase, especially in the upper elementary and middle school grades. Encourage them to use natural shortcuts like texting language. Use open outlines if you need to provide some structure for them, but even better is something like Cornell Notes to teach students how to take notes in class. Now these are just some simple things, but again remember our focus, getting students to mentally engage with the material rather than just being passive mentally. I hope these will be helpful to you.